I knew she thought I was too weak to do anything about it. The way she laughed that night, right there at my own dinner table, told me everything she believed about me. She thought I was soft. She thought I was old. She thought I was harmless. It was the sound of her laugh that stayed with me more than the words. A high, thin laugh, curled at the edges with the confidence of someone who doesn't think consequences apply to them. My daughter-in-law sat there at the head of my table as if she'd earned that seat, and when she called me fragile, everyone heard it, including my son. She didn't say it kindly. Not the way you might say it to an elder whose hands have started shaking with age or whose steps have turned small and careful. No, she said it like an insult, a verdict, a label. "Leave it, she's too fragile to carry anything heavier than gossip," she said as I tried to help clear the dishes. The room went quiet for half a second, that kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears, and then she laughed. A laugh that said she didn't fear me, didn't respect me, didn't expect I would push back. My son didn't defend me. He didn't even look up. I remember standing there with a spoon still in my hand, the metal cooling in my fingers, the smell of rosemary and garlic still heavy in the air. The kitchen light hummed above us. Someone coughed. A chair slid faintly on the wood floor. And in that moment, with my own family swallowing the insult like it was nothing, I realized something that burned hotter than embarrassment. She believed I was incapable of damage. She believed I didn't know anything. She believed I couldn't take anything from her. She believed I had no power. She had no idea what I knew. She had no idea what I held inside my mouth, like a sealed envelope. She had no idea that the one person she trusted the most, the only woman she feared judgment from, had already confessed something to me that could turn her world to dust with one sentence. Her mother. Her mother had sat in my living room just 3 months prior, with her hands shaking against her coffee cup, eyes glossy with the kind of guilt that doesn't let a person sleep. And she told me the very thing her daughter would collapse to hear spoken aloud. A secret heavy enough to change dinner conversation into a battlefield. That night, when my daughter-in-law mocked me, she didn't just humiliate me. She unlocked the door to something she never imagined I would use. She thought I was too weak. She forgot that even a quiet woman can carry a loaded truth. And I made up my mind, right there, with the spoon still in my hand, before anyone even stood from the table. I would not raise my voice. I would not throw a scene. I would not curse or slam or fight. No, I would do the one thing she believed I wasn't capable of. I would choose the exact moment, the exact audience, and the exact sentence to bring her mother's secret to the table, gently, surgically, with so much calm that it would cut deeper than rage ever could. She didn't know it yet, but that laugh of hers was the last time she would ever feel safe in my house. Because you can mock a woman's strength. You can underestimate her spine. You can dismiss her A. But once you give her a reason to use what she knows, you no longer get to choose how the truth arrives. Before that night, our home had been quiet in a way that felt ordinary, even comforting. Not silent, not empty, but the kind of quiet that hums along with the rhythm of your life. Breakfast coffee brewing, toast popping from the toaster, the soft shuffle of my slippers across the kitchen floor. I liked mornings like that. The smell of butter melting over toast, the faint tang of orange juice, the newspaper rustling as my husband, Robert, read the sports page. My son, Michael, would come in, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes, complaining about the cold tile under his bare feet. We had a life that was predictable, a rhythm I had built carefully over decades. I had learned the subtle art of keeping my household running smoothly without anyone noticing the effort. The perfect roast chicken on Sundays, laundry folded neatly and stacked just so, little notes tucked into Michael's lunchbox when he was younger. Remember, even a long day is made brighter by one small kindness. Michael was my pride. He was steady, thoughtful, the kind of man who would hold a door for a stranger or sit quietly beside someone who was grieving. But in his own house, he sometimes turned into the boy I raised, gentle, quiet, too eager to keep the peace. And then there was Emily, my daughter-in-law, 5 years his junior, sharp as a tack, confident to the point of arrogance. When she entered our lives, I welcomed her with open arms. I wanted her to feel at home. I believed in family, in bridging gaps, in softening edges. But she had a way of observing people that made you feel exposed, as if she could detect your fears, your weaknesses, your patterns. It was subtle at first, a glance, a remark, a laugh that lingered longer than politeness warranted. I remember our first dinner together. I had roasted a small chicken, steamed green beans, mashed potatoes with just the right amount of cream and butter, and a pie from the local bakery. Emily sat at the table, her posture perfect, nails painted a bright cherry red, hair cascading neatly over her shoulders. She smiled, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I noticed it immediately. There was a sharpness in her tone when she asked about my recipes, a tiny edge in her laughter when she commented on the quaintness of our home. But I brushed it off. Every new family member had quirks. I had them, too. In our home, the walls had memories. The faded wallpaper in the dining room told stories of birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet Sunday evenings spent with board games or old movies. The kitchen smelled perpetually of comfort: roasted garlic, vanilla from a simmering pie, the occasional aroma of my morning coffee mixed with faint hints of lemon polish from when I scrubbed the counters. These were the details of life I clung to, small anchors in a world that sometimes felt too loud, too fast. Robert and I had been married for 40 years. We had seen storms, seen children grow, seen neighbors come and go. I had learned to read his silences, to notice when he was quietly burdened or quietly joyful. He rarely raised his voice. He preferred calm conversations over dinners, and when conflict came, he absorbed it like a sponge, hoping it would dissipate before it touched anyone else. Our mornings were quiet routines, and our evenings were spent either in the living room or around the kitchen table. Sometimes Michael would stay late after work, sometimes he would bring Emily, and on those nights, I genuinely tried to make her feel included. I cooked dishes I thought she would like, asked her about her day, complimented her hair or her choice of wine. And yet, there was always a tension beneath her polite smiles. A feeling that she was measuring me, judging me, deciding silently whether I was worth her respect. Emily was ambitious, organized, precise. I admired that, I truly did. But there was a streak of cruelty in her observations, not outright meanness, but a quiet, calculating sense of superiority. She had a knack for pointing out weaknesses without appearing accusatory, for making subtle jabs that made you question yourself. I knew mothers-in-law were supposed to feel threatened by new daughters-in-law. I had warned myself not to fall into that trap. I reminded myself often. She is family, and families survive on patience, on endurance, on love that softens edges. Still, she had a way of slipping into the center of attention. If there was laughter, she controlled it. If there was conversation, she directed it. And when she chose to be cold, she didn't need words. Her posture, her eyes, the tilt of her chin, all said enough. But life with Michael and Emily was mostly ordinary. We shared meals, exchanged holiday gifts, laughed over old stories, and I quietly enjoyed the way our household settled into rhythm. It was peaceful, until, of course, the little cracks began to show. The first hints were subtle. A rolled eye when I suggested a recipe, a sigh when I told a story about Michael as a boy, a remark about how helpful I was being, with a tone that implied I was overstepping, meddling in things that weren't my business. I ignored them. I chalked them up to personality. I told myself to be patient, to keep our home calm, to remember that peace sometimes comes at the cost of swallowing small hurts. Evenings were the worst. I would wash the dishes, rinse the pots, listen to the quiet hum of the dishwasher, and feel her presence lingering in the air long after she had left. I would feel a subtle sting when Michael didn't defend me. I would hear her laughter replaying in my mind, sharp and condescending. And I would remind myself that it was her problem, not mine. I had my own life outside their opinions. I had a garden where I grew tomatoes and herbs. I had neighbors who brought over apple pies in the fall, who knocked on my door just to chat. I had books stacked neatly by the armchair, a diary I wrote in each night, recording thoughts no one else would ever see. I had faith in the small acts of daily life, the routines that grounded me. And I had a secret, one I kept like a treasured letter folded in my pocket. A secret that belonged to Emily's mother. A secret that I had been entrusted with carefully, the way you might hold a fragile vase with cracks that shouldn't be touched. I didn't dwell on it. I didn't plan. I didn't imagine using it. I simply kept it safe because some truths are dangerous in the wrong hands. But the more Emily tried to push, to belittle, to measure me against her idea of weakness, the more that secret rested in my mind like a loaded pen. It was harmless for now. It was dormant, waiting, quiet. But as I would soon learn, sometimes patience is the most powerful kind of strength. Because life, even in its ordinary routines, has a way of testing you. Sometimes it comes softly, in a glance or a remark. Sometimes it comes in a storm that breaks through the walls you've built. And sometimes, just sometimes, it comes with the perfect, unassuming opportunity to show people exactly who you are and who you are not. I knew she thought I was too weak to do anything about it. The way she laughed that night, right there at my own dinner table, told me everything she believed about me. She thought I was soft. She thought I was old. She thought I was harmless. It was the sound of her laugh that stayed with me more than the words. A high, thin laugh, curled at the edges with the confidence of someone who doesn't think consequences apply to them. My daughter-in-law sat there at the head of my table as if she'd earned that seat, and when she called me fragile, everyone heard it, including my son. She didn't say it kindly. Not the way you might say it to an elder whose hands have started shaking with age or whose steps have turned small and careful. No, she said it like an insult, a verdict, a label. "Leave it, she's too fragile to carry anything heavier than gossip," she said as I tried to help clear the dishes. The room went quiet for half a second, that kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears, and then she laughed. A laugh that said she didn't fear me, didn't respect me, didn't expect I would push back. My son didn't defend me. He didn't even look up. I remember standing there with a spoon still in my hand, the metal cooling in my fingers, the smell of rosemary and garlic still heavy in the air. The kitchen light hummed above us. Someone coughed. A chair slid faintly on the wood floor. And in that moment, with my own family swallowing the insult like it was nothing, I realized something that burned hotter than embarrassment. She believed I was incapable of damage. She believed I didn't know anything. She believed I couldn't take anything from her. She believed I had no power. She had no idea what I knew. She had no idea what I held inside my mouth, like a sealed envelope. She had no idea that the one person she trusted the most, the only woman she feared judgment from, had already confessed something to me that could turn her world to dust with one sentence. Her mother. Her mother had sat in my living room just 3 months prior, with her hands shaking against her coffee cup, eyes glossy with the kind of guilt that doesn't let a person sleep. And she told me the very thing her daughter would collapse to hear spoken aloud. A secret heavy enough to change dinner conversation into a battlefield. That night, when my daughter-in-law mocked me, she didn't just humiliate me. She unlocked the door to something she never imagined I would use. She thought I was too weak. She forgot that even a quiet woman can carry a loaded truth. And I made up my mind, right there, with the spoon still in my hand, before anyone even stood from the table. I would not raise my voice. I would not throw a scene. I would not curse or slam or fight. No, I would do the one thing she believed I wasn't capable of. I would choose the exact moment, the exact audience, and the exact sentence to bring her mother's secret to the table, gently, surgically, with so much calm that it would cut deeper than rage ever could. She didn't know it yet, but that laugh of hers was the last time she would ever feel safe in my house. Because you can mock a woman's strength. You can underestimate her spine. You can dismiss her A. But once you give her a reason to use what she knows, you no longer get to choose how the truth arrives. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when everything crystallized. I had been preparing lunch, humming softly to myself, while Emily and Michael were in the living room discussing weekend plans. The smell of sautéed onions and rosemary filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh bread I had baked that morning. Everything seemed normal, ordinary, safe. But nothing about that day was ordinary. I had just returned from checking the garden when I noticed her phone sitting on the corner of the coffee table, an innocent, casual placement. Emily had left it there briefly, distracted by some conversation with Michael. My eyes caught the screen, bright with a message preview. I almost didn't glance, almost let it be, but something compelled me. There it was. A thread between Emily and her mother, casual at first, but quickly revealing itself to be something more. I could read just enough from the short preview to make my heart skip a beat. There were phrases, half-spoken sentences, references to events I had never known but recognized immediately for their significance. Secrets she believed were buried, carefully guarded, now visible if only I were paying attention. My hands went cold. The counter I leaned on seemed suddenly sharper, the floor tiles harder under my feet. I didn't move. I didn't reach. I just watched. The truth hit me slowly, the way water seeps through cracks in stone, persistent, inevitable. Emily had built her confidence, her arrogance on lies. She had mocked me, dismissed me, measured my age and assumed weakness, all while hiding the very part of her life that her mother had confided to me, something that, if revealed, would strip her veneer of superiority clean off. I thought back to that afternoon months ago, when her mother had visited me. The air in my living room had been thick with unspoken worry, her hands shaking around a coffee cup that she barely held. She had leaned forward, voice trembling, and told me things that I promised I would never speak of: a history, a mistake, a shame she could not bring to the surface. And now, staring at that phone, I realized the child who had mocked me, laughed at me, treated me as weak, had inherited a world of secrets she believed she could control. It was betrayal on two levels. The first was personal, Emily's continual undermining, the subtle humiliation at my own table, the way she had laughed at my supposed fragility. That stung, yes, but it was bearable. The second was heavier, almost suffocating, the knowledge that she had built her life, her confidence, on truths that were not hers to wield. She was untouchable in her own mind, untouchable in our family, untouchable in our house. Until now. I waited. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, pretending to arrange dishes, my ears picking up the faintest tones of her conversation. She was speaking softly to Michael, as if the subject required caution. And then she glanced toward me, that quick, calculating glance she often threw my way, unaware that I had already seen everything I needed. The betrayal wasn't just in her behavior toward me, it was in the casual confidence she had with my son, the person who should have been immune to deception. I had to be careful. This was delicate. It wasn't about revenge yet. It wasn't about confrontation. It was about understanding and choosing the right moment to act. Lunch was served. I carried the plates to the table, my hands steady despite the churn of emotions inside me. Emily's eyes flicked toward me as she sat, a faint smirk playing on her lips. She thought she had the upper hand. She didn't know that I now held the map to her hidden world, the truth she had kept from everyone, even my own son. We ate in polite silence at first. The roast chicken was golden, tender, the green beans crisp, the mashed potatoes smooth and buttery. But beneath the ordinary sounds of cutlery against plates, I felt the tension building. I could almost hear it, like the quiet creak of a hinge waiting to snap. And then, as if prompted by something deep inside me, I asked a simple question. So, Emily, your mother mentioned she had an experience similar to something you faced recently. How did that resolve? The words were soft, calm, careful. No accusation, no edge, just a question. Her fork froze midair. Her eyes widened just slightly. And then the smallest flicker of panic crossed her face, barely noticeable, but enough to confirm that she understood the stakes. Michael looked between us, confusion on his face. "What do you mean?" he asked. I set down my own fork, the metal clinking lightly against the plate. "Oh, just things families sometimes don't talk about. Secrets that can change how we see someone we thought we knew." Her mother's confession had been a weight, yes, but now I realized that using it wisely required patience. I didn't reveal it outright. I let her react, let her realize, just for a heartbeat, that the armor she wore so confidently might not be so impenetrable. Emily's hands trembled slightly. I saw it barely, but enough. She attempted to mask it with a laugh, but it faltered halfway. The perfect, untouchable daughter-in-law had cracked, just a hairline fracture, but a fracture nonetheless. And I knew then that the first wave of betrayal had passed, the emotional shock settling into a heavy understanding. The quiet woman, the weak mother-in-law, had power she had never needed to display before. It was a revelation that stunned me almost as much as it did her. For the first time, I spoke in a tone that was calm, measured, reflective, anti-me style. "Sometimes," I said, "we think strength is loud, we think confidence is sharp, but real strength is knowing what to hold and what to reveal, and knowing the difference can change everything." She looked at me then, truly looked, eyes wide, chest tight, caught between denial and realization. And in that moment, I felt something inside me shift, a mix of vindication and sorrow, because I had never wanted to humiliate her. I had wanted her to see, to understand, to recognize the consequences of her choices. The betrayal was complete, not just of trust, but of perception. Emily had underestimated me. She had mocked me. And now, for the first time, she understood that there were truths she could not control. Michael, still oblivious to the full weight of the revelation, shifted in his seat. I could see confusion etched on his face, worry growing. He looked from Emily to me, sensing tension he couldn't name. I said nothing more. The rest of the meal continued in polite silence. The roast chicken was finished, the plates cleared, but the undercurrent lingered. I didn't need to speak. She knew. And that knowledge, the quiet, inescapable understanding, was more powerful than any words I could have used in anger. For the first time in months, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I had held my ground without raising my voice. I had preserved my dignity, and I had, subtly, begun to shift the balance. Betrayal was a bitter taste, but truth, carefully wielded, was sweeter than revenge. After that lunch, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry in the way people think of anger, red-faced, shouting, lashing out. No, my anger had softened into quiet resolve, a stillness that hit a sharper edge than any outburst could ever achieve. I understood that the power I now held wasn't in confrontation, but in timing. Emily had shown her hand. She had revealed the boundaries she thought were invulnerable, and now I would act, slowly, carefully, deliberately. The first step was observation. Every conversation, every glance, every laugh became a data point. I watched the way she moved through our home, how she positioned herself near Michael, how she handled questions from neighbors or extended family. It was almost mesmerizing. The way someone confident in their dominance suddenly became cautious, a slight hesitancy creeping into their body language. That was my opening. I didn't rush. There was no need. Patience, I reminded myself, was a weapon that outlasts impulse. I spent mornings tending the garden, afternoons baking or reading, and evenings at the table with Emily and Michael. Each action I took was measured. A smile here, a casual question there, all designed to provoke small reactions to see how far her composure could stretch. One afternoon, I invited her to help me with a small project, organizing some old family albums in the attic. She agreed, probably thinking it would be an opportunity to assert herself, to show that she belonged, that she could contribute. She didn't realize it would be a lesson in subtlety, in timing, in restraint. We went through the albums together. She was curious, inquisitive, and I let her look. I commented casually on photographs, Michael as a boy, his first school play, his graduation. She smiled politely, but I noticed her hands tightening around a photo, the slightest furrow in her brow when I mentioned a name she didn't expect me to know. A quiet victory, almost imperceptible, but it told me she knew I remembered, that I retained more than she thought I did. Later, I began testing boundaries at dinner. Nothing overt, just questions, gentle prompts. "Emily, remember your mother once mentioned how she handled certain, difficult situations. I wonder what advice she might have given you." The fork paused midway to her mouth. Eyes widened. A subtle inhalation. Her composure teetered just slightly. She forced a laugh, but it lacked her usual sharp confidence. I smiled softly, carefully, letting the silence carry more weight than any words could. It was then I realized something important. She was human. She was not invincible. And the knowledge I held, that quiet, dangerous truth her mother had entrusted to me, was not just leverage. It was a key to showing her the consequences of underestimating me. I began to plan more deliberately, not with malice, not with vengeance, but with precision. Each encounter, each dinner, each casual remark was designed to plant small seeds. A mention of family gatherings, of memories that only I could recount accurately. A careful reflection of past events, phrased as though I was merely reminiscing. And each time I watched her reaction closely, noting hesitation, subtle flinches, and those micro-expressions that betrayed true feelings. One evening, I decided it was time to test the boundaries further. Emily had brought a friend over for coffee, someone from her work. A social call, casual, harmless. But I knew that even small audiences amplify the effect of truth. As we sat in the living room, sipping tea and nibbling cookies, I mentioned an anecdote about her mother, carefully crafted, abstract enough to avoid revealing the full secret, but precise enough that someone familiar would understand. I watched Emily's face like a hawk. Her smile faltered, her posture stiffened, and her hands tightened around her cup. She was trying not to react, trying to maintain control, but control was slipping. And then she excused herself to the kitchen, and I followed, not to confront, not to scold, but to observe, to plant another seed of awareness. "Emily," I said softly, voice calm, intimate, like Auntie me speaking across generations. "You've carried yourself with confidence, but remember, confidence without humility is fragile. Sometimes the things we believe are hidden are not." Her shoulders sagged slightly, and for the first time I saw vulnerability in her eyes. Not fear, exactly. Not shame entirely. Just recognition. Recognition that the world is larger than the bubble we create around ourselves, that strength isn't always measured by arrogance, and that knowledge, the right knowledge at the right moment, is a form of quiet power. She didn't respond immediately. She just nodded, almost imperceptibly, and returned to the living room. But I knew, I felt it in the shift of her energy. She was recalculating, silently, internally, and that was enough for me. The next days, I continued with my gentle, strategic actions. I shared stories, reflected on family history, even let subtle hints of her mother's secrets slip into conversation in vague, indirect ways. I never named names, I never revealed specifics, but the weight of implication was there. She noticed, of course. Every woman notices when someone has insight they do not possess. And Emily, who had mocked me for weakness, began to adjust. She became cautious in her speech, careful in her tone, polite to the point of stiffness. The arrogance that had once radiated so effortlessly now appeared strained. She still smiled, still laughed, but the laughter no longer carried the same edge. She was aware now, aware that she was not untouchable, aware that she had underestimated me. And every night when the house was quiet, I reflected on what I had done. Not with pride, not with joy, but with a steady, measured understanding. I had chosen restraint over rage, subtlety over confrontation. I had acted not to punish, but to awaken awareness. And in doing so, I had preserved my dignity while subtly reclaiming my power. The reaction I had chosen was working. Not explosively, not dramatically, but like a tide. Patient, persistent, unyielding. And the best part, the part that carried a quiet satisfaction, was that she never realized the full scope of what I knew until I chose to reveal it in my own time, in my own way. It was a lesson for both of us, one that would linger. Strength is not loud. Confidence is not sharp. And even the quietest woman, the one dismissed as fragile or weak, holds the power to change everything if she knows how to wait and how to act. It happened slowly, almost like dawn breaking over a quiet neighborhood. The secret I had held carefully, delicately, respectfully, began to ripple outward, first in whispers, then in hushed conversations, and finally in the kind of glances and questions that make a person feel exposed even when no one speaks directly. It started at a small gathering at a friend's house. Emily had invited a few colleagues, thinking it would be casual, harmless, a display of her effortless charm. She didn't know that the subtle threads I had begun to weave over the weeks were about to reach their quiet climax. As we sat in the living room, sipping coffee and discussing weekend plans, I mentioned a memory, a seemingly ordinary one, of Emily's mother visiting when Emily was a child, dealing with a difficult choice in a way that most people would never understand. I didn't name names. I didn't speak an accusation. I simply recalled a moment calmly, with the kind of reflective tone that carries weight without forcing it. Emily's posture stiffened. Her eyes widened subtly. I noticed, of course, I always notice. And then a colleague leaned forward with curiosity, asking for clarification. I answered with just enough detail to hint at complexity without spilling the full story. But those hints were like sparks. Once ignited, they spread faster than anticipated. By the end of that afternoon, murmurs had started. Emily could feel it immediately. The way neighbors glanced at her differently, the subtle changes in tone when people spoke to her. She was careful, overly careful, as if walking on a narrow bridge over water that might conceal dangerous currents. At home, the tension escalated. Michael sensed it, though he didn't know the details. He noticed her quiet moments, the way she lingered near the door before entering rooms, how she avoided prolonged eye contact with me. And she began to withdraw slightly from social interactions, hesitant to laugh too loudly, too confidently, in front of friends and family who now seemed to be observing more closely. I never pressed the issue. I didn't gloat. I simply let the natural course of awareness unfold. People notice patterns, they notice cracks, and once a seed is planted, it grows quietly in the minds of others. It wasn't just about Emily feeling the weight of her mother's secret. It was about the community noticing the subtle shift in her demeanor, the carefulness, the hesitation, the way her laughter no longer carried the same sharp edge. Invitations became less frequent. Conversations grew more formal. People who once admired her effortless charm now approached with measured caution. One afternoon, at a neighborhood book club, I noticed it clearly. Emily had tried to steer a discussion, to charm and command attention, but her words were met with polite nods rather than the enthusiastic engagement she expected. She smiled, but the smile was tight. There was a shadow of self-consciousness, a quiet recognition that her confidence was no longer absolute. I could see it, and I didn't need to speak. The public consequence of hidden truths is often more powerful than any confrontation. People sense authenticity, sense imbalance, sense vulnerability even when it's masked. Emily's subtle unease spread through our social circle like a quiet ripple, small at first but persistent, touching every corner she moved through. At home, Michael confronted me quietly one evening. "Mom," he said, voice low, concerned, "something is happening with Emily. She's different. She's withdrawn, tense. I don't understand it." I smiled gently, placing a hand on his arm. "Change often comes quietly, Michael. People sometimes carry burdens they don't share, and the way they respond to them can be surprising. Sometimes, awareness is its own consequence." He frowned. "Are you involved?" I shook my head slowly. "I've done nothing to force anything. I simply held knowledge carefully. And when someone believes they are untouchable, even the smallest truth can shift the balance." The following weeks were telling. Family gatherings, once lively with laughter and casual teasing, now carried a subtle tension. Emily was polite, yes, but distant. Conversations that she might have dominated before were now shared, moderated, influenced by the awareness that her previous confidence no longer gave her immunity. Even neighbors and friends, unaware of the details, began noticing a change. Whispers spread, questions were asked behind doors, eyes were cast in curious glances. The social ripple that began with my quiet, careful storytelling had expanded, touching more people than I anticipated. Emily's mother, unaware of the exact consequences, sensed the shift. She reached out one evening, voice hesitant, carrying guilt and relief in equal measure. I didn't know it would reach her like this," she said. I replied softly, gently, the way one might speak across generations of wisdom. Secrets have weight, and people underestimate the force of truth. It's never cruel to let someone see the consequences of underestimating others, if it's done with care. Emily's responses became constrained. She began asking fewer questions, withdrawing from social situations she once sought eagerly. She stopped mocking, stopped belittling, stopped testing my patience in public or private. The lesson had landed, subtly, quietly, without theatrics, without shame inflicted through anger. And Michael, finally observing the change, began to reconcile his perception. He saw the shift not as punishment, not as humiliation, but as an awakening. He understood that his wife's confidence had always been built on assumptions that did not hold in the presence of knowledge, patience, and subtle power. The public consequence, I realized, was more potent than any confrontation I could have staged. Emily faced the truth not through accusation, but through observation, reflection, and awareness. She was still part of the family, still welcome, still loved, but she had learned humility, awareness, and the limits of control. And I quietly had regained my place not through force, but through patience, insight, and careful application of the knowledge entrusted to me. The ripple extended beyond her alone, influencing how she interacted with everyone in our circle, and slowly, subtly, creating a new equilibrium in our household. The lesson lingered. Strength is not always loud. Confidence is not always forceful. And even those who believe themselves untouchable must eventually face the subtle, quiet consequences of hidden truths. In the calm aftermath, I watched Emily one evening, seated across from me at the table, her hands folded, her posture cautious but more attentive. She spoke softly, carefully, and for the first time truly listened. And in that listening, I saw acknowledgement not just of me, but of the lessons that life, quietly, can teach. Time has a way of softening even the hardest moments. In the weeks after the revelation, the tension in our home gradually loosened, like ice melting under the morning sun. Emily no longer carried the sharp edge that had once cut through our conversations. Instead, she approached interactions with a new carefulness, a reflective patience I had not seen before. And while she was still learning, still adjusting, it was clear that change, quiet, subtle but real, had begun to settle into her bones. Michael noticed it first. One evening, as we were preparing dinner together, he said softly, "Mom, I think Emily, she's different. In a good way. She's listening now, really listening." I smiled, wiping my hands on a towel, the warmth of the kitchen wrapping around me. "Sometimes, seeing the consequences of our actions is the only way to understand them fully," I replied. Emily herself began to act differently. She stopped making offhanded remarks, stopped testing my patience at every opportunity, and began participating in the household with a quiet mindfulness. There were still moments of tension, old habits die slowly, but they were fewer, smaller, less significant. I remember one evening in particular. We were sitting together after dinner, the dishes cleared, the soft hum of the dishwasher filling the kitchen. Emily reached over, hesitating, and touched my hand lightly. I want to apologize," she said, voice low, careful, sincere. "I didn't understand before. I didn't know how my words or my actions affected you." I looked at her, my heart softening, and nodded. "Thank you, Emily. That means more than you know. Strength isn't about never making mistakes, it's about learning from them and being willing to change." That night, something shifted in our household. The tension that had once hung like a heavy curtain began to lift, replaced by a cautious but genuine warmth. Conversations flowed more easily, laughter returned to the table, and the small routines of daily life, breakfast, gardening, tea in the afternoon, regained their comforting rhythm. I found myself reflecting on the past months often, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. It had been painful at times, yes, but it had also been instructive. I had learned that patience can be more powerful than anger, that knowledge held carefully can be more effective than confrontation, and that dignity, when preserved, commands its own quiet respect. Emily, too, seemed to grow from the experience. I noticed her gestures changing, the way she listened more intently to Michael, the way she offered help without expecting acknowledgement, the way she spoke with neighbors and friends with genuine interest rather than calculation. She was still ambitious, still confident, but her confidence was tempered by humility and awareness. One Sunday afternoon, we gathered in the living room after church. The sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the small imperfections in our home, the chipped paint on the windowsill, the worn spots on the rug, but instead of feeling like flaws, they felt like markers of a life lived fully, with history and love woven into every corner. Emily sat beside me, and for the first time I didn't feel a wall between us. We spoke quietly about family memories, recipes, and small traditions that had been part of our lives for decades. Her laughter was softer, warmer, genuine. She no longer needed to dominate or mock. She had learned that respect is earned through presence and understanding, not intimidation. Michael watched us, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It feels like things are finally back to normal," he said. I nodded. Back to normal, yes, but better too. We've all learned something important. There were still moments when the past whispered, a memory of a harsh word, a flash of tension at a dinner table. But those moments were no longer defining. They were reminders of growth, of lessons learned, of the quiet strength that can change lives without raising a voice. I took a walk in the garden that evening, breathing in the scent of blooming flowers, feeling the cool earth beneath my hands as I tended the tomatoes and herbs. I thought about the months that had passed, about the way life tests us, about the subtle power of patience, awareness, and dignity. I felt peace settle over me, a calm satisfaction in knowing that I had acted wisely, not rashly, and that the family I loved had emerged stronger, more connected, more understanding. And as I looked back toward the house, where Emily and Michael laughed quietly over a board game, I realized that healing is not just about forgiveness. It's about reflection, about learning, about giving space for others to grow, and about using wisdom instead of anger to guide change. Our family was intact, stronger than before, not because we avoided conflict, but because we faced it with care, patience, and understanding. Emily had learned humility, Michael had learned awareness, and I had reaffirmed my quiet, steady strength. In that moment, I felt gratitude for the lessons, for the opportunity to guide change gently, and for the understanding that life often offers second chances to those willing to listen, learn, and act with dignity. It wasn't a perfect ending, life rarely is, but it was a resolution filled with warmth, reflection, and growth, and in that there was profound satisfaction. Sitting here now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I often think about how life unfolds in ways we never expect. How someone we once thought weak, overlooked, or fragile can hold strength quietly, patiently, and profoundly. And how sometimes the ones who seem confident, even untouchable, are the ones who need the most guidance, not in anger, not in humiliation, but through understanding, awareness, and subtle reflection. The months with Emily taught me more than I ever anticipated. I learned that patience is its own power, that dignity is its own form of influence, and that knowledge, held carefully, applied wisely, can change not only others but the way we see ourselves. I realized that the world is not a place to dominate, nor a stage for constant confrontation. It is a place to guide, to teach gently, and to act with quiet integrity. Emily has grown, yes, but so have I. I have grown in my awareness, in my understanding of human nature, and in my confidence that even the smallest actions, a word, a gesture, a memory recalled at the right time, can have profound consequences. I have learned that strength does not roar. It listens. It observes. It acts carefully and wisely. I look at my family now, Michael, Emily, our shared life in this house filled with laughter, small routines, and love, and I see the results of quiet action. There is warmth where there was tension, respect where there was arrogance, and understanding where there was pride. And I carry with me a gentle satisfaction, that I did not act in haste, that I preserved my dignity, and that I guided change not through force, but through awareness. I share this story not to boast, not to incite judgment, but to offer reflection. Life is complicated, full of challenges, and often the ones we least expect require the most patience and understanding. Sometimes the greatest victories are silent, felt in the shift of a glance, the softening of a smile, the quiet acknowledgement of awareness. And so, I leave you with this question. Have you ever underestimated someone quietly strong, only to discover that their patience and insight were greater than your assumptions? How would you act if you held knowledge that could gently, yet profoundly, change the course of someone's life? If this story resonates with you, if it reminds you of a moment when patience, dignity, or quiet wisdom changed everything, share your thoughts, your reflections, and your experiences in the comments. Stories connect us, teach us, and remind us that even in the smallest, quietest moments, there is power, there is understanding, and there is growth. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for letting this story be a gentle reminder that strength is not always loud, confidence is not always sharp, and the quietest among us can teach the most profound lessons.